Going all over the map for today's Locked On Pacers. We'll talk about the latest on Myles Turner and Lance Stephenson before talking a little bit about Aaron Nesmith and a piece I just wrote about him. Plus, Larry Bird no longer has an active role with the franchise. We'll get to all that today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the Westside Community News, and today we're going all over the map, covering some of the latest news around the Pacers as we head into August, the slowest time of the NBA calendar. Thankfully, lots to talk about today and into this coming week. Had to do some changes to the show planning this week, but thankfully there's a lot to catch up on, so we'll do the latest on Myles Turner and Lance Stephenson. Big thanks to the guys at the Setting the Pace podcast for providing a lot of the information you're going to hear in the first segment today. Shout out to Alex Golden and Facci over there at Setting the Pace. We'll talk about Aaron Nesmith, who I just wrote a piece about, and I have some interesting stats with Aaron Nesmith that I would like to share and discuss, because I think he's an interesting player who could have an interesting role on this team and has the chance to grow into more with this franchise. And at the end, Scott Agness report, Larry Bird, no longer an active role with this Pacers team. What does that mean? Does it mean anything? And yeah, we'll just talk about that report in general. Good report from Scott. I have to start here by saying, though, sad news in the NBA as Bill Russell, NBA legend and really just a human legend, passes away on Sunday. Terribly sad news. One of the pioneers of the game, got the NBA off the ground in terms of popularity. One of the best to ever do it. One of the best winners and players in NBA history. The Finals MVP trophy still named after him. Fantastic activist for human beings as well. Terrific person, terrific player. Absolute condolences to the Russell family and anyone who knew him personally. He didn't ever play against the Pacers because they did not ever overlap in terms of franchise timing. He did play against the Fort Wayne Pistons. For those of you listening from up north in Indiana, a little shout out there. During his rookie season 5 times, and of course, he kicked their butt in 3 of those performances, averaging nearly 10 points a game as a rookie. One of the best to ever do it, an all-time good person. Pacers put out a statement on that if you would like to read more about it. And I highly recommend on the Locked On Podcast Network, we've got this power. You hop on over to Locked On Celtics, hear what John Corrales has to say about this. He'll have stories on stories about Bill Russell, his career, and his life this week over there for you on Locked On Celtics. Let's dive into Pacers news, though, since this is, in fact, a Pacers podcast. Starting with Myles Turner. Big stuff for Myles Turner this week. He's been in the news a lot after the Ayton saga. What's going to go on there? How's that going to end up going? And then he was in trade rumors once again for the 10 trillionth time of his career, as The Athletic was the first to report, and then many have followed, that it was called a dead deal by The Athletic, but the Lakers and Pacers apparently talked about a Russell Westbrook trade that would send Buddy Hield and Turner to LA, Westbrook and picks to Indiana. So Bob Kravitz, who was part of the team with Shams Charania, who originally dropped that Pacers-Lakers trade report, said on the Setting the Pace podcast, if you want to go listen to that from last week, he said, let me find the exact quote, they, being the Pacers, have every reason to believe that Myles Turner is not going to sign an extension. It's a very big deal. Good reporting from Bob there, who said he was not guessing on the show, and then later said in no uncertain terms that he's not guessing. He does not think Turner would like to remain in Indiana, which was, of course, huge news. There's been nothing about that reported until that, which I thought was fascinating. And look, if Turner has no interest in signing an extension, the Pacers, and he has an expiring contract, they have to think about trading him at some point anyway because he's on an expiring deal. If they can't convince him to sign an extension, which he could do into the season but may not want to, as Kravitz has suggested, they should think about doing that now. He has more value now than he will into the season unless he really pops after playing after having an injury this past season. They have to consider it now, and that could be part of why he's in these talks with the Lakers in the first place. That said, though, the story does not end there, as Myles Turner took to Twitter when an aggregator of the report shared the quote from Kravitz. Myles Turner put a GIF of a bunch of caps, bottle caps from the video game Fallout. That might sound like nothing. Cap is basically slang for that's not true in this case. So I thought that was very interesting. That was Myles Turner's first basically public comments about any of this, even though it's just a tweet with a GIF that has no words in it. Since the Ayton stuff came out, since this Lakers report came out, I thought that was all very interesting. So look, Kravitz was asked about an extension. He was talking about Myles Turner's long-term future in Indy. I don't think he was saying specifically like Myles Turner doesn't want to be here right this second right now, but it is very possible that Myles Turner would not sign an extension. I laid out those reasons on this very podcast many times, and that makes a lot of sense to me that he wouldn't want to commit to Indiana beyond the season, maybe even right now after how this offseason has gone for him. And again, if he is not willing to sign an extension or not entertaining even what an extension framework could look like, especially if the Pacers have offered any sort of renegotiation, then the Pacers absolutely have to consider trading him. That makes all the sense in the world for them to consider the future of their franchise, even if he is good and talented and on their timeline. I think it's that simple, right? Either he's going to be here long term and they will think about what the Pacers could look like with Myles Turner, or if he's not going to sign an extension and be here long term, or even humor that he would sign a deal next summer, yeah, they have to think about trading him. That's how the NBA system works. But Myles Turner did, in fact, call that report. He called cap. I don't want to mince his words. He didn't say anything beyond a gif of caps in it. But it also is worth noting to me, Myles Turner currently in Dallas, running his annual basketball camp down there. I think it's in Fort Worth, actually. And Rick Carlisle, Pacers head coach, was there. Rick Carlisle also has ties to Dallas, of course, so maybe just a coincidence, but it's never a coincidence when a player and coach are in the same place. So noteworthy that those two are together in this offseason time, perhaps talking about what this future could look like, having more conversations about that. So we'll see where that ends up going. I don't think anyone is disagreeing with anyone necessarily, but we'll see where this is headed. I think that, again, it's as simple as if Turner is not willing to even humor an extension and has said that to the Pacers, they have to consider trading him. And if he's willing to go into the season and play and see what happens and see if he can get that bigger role he has long desired, the Pacers should be right to give that to him and see what he can do, see if he can fit, and still consider negotiations during the season into free agency next summer. The other news we got over the weekend from Alex Golden, one of the hosts of Setting the Pace, via a tweet. He said, per source, Lance Stephenson will fully embrace coming back to Indiana and wants to retire as a Pacer. Lance is completely fine with taking on whatever role the Pacers ask of him and is happy with where the Pacers are headed. As of right now, no deal is in place. Woo! Big bomb there from Alex, getting the scoopage on that. Look, if Lance is fine with no role, like that is the only way that he makes sense as a signing to me at this point. He should be their fourth point guard if he signed right now. He should not any of the backcourt players the Pacers currently have. McConnell, Nembhard, Halliburton, Nesmith, Buddy Hield, none of those guys should be behind Lance in any sort of rotation or any sort of balance of power. Given the Pacers' youth, given the Pacers' goals, where they're headed, they should all be playing ahead of Lance Stephenson if he's on the team. If he's willing to just be on the team, to be a vet, to be a guy who's communicating with young players and never plays in games, that makes some sense as a franchise legend, as a guy who plays better here and has some positional versatility. But even at the 3, where he did play some last season, maybe if Kendall Brown's on a 2-way and with Fort Wayne a lot, they would need him sometimes, but it seems like more often than not they would just rock with Duarte, Nesmith, and Buddy Hield at those spots. So even there, it's not easy to see where Lance would have a role. But if he, again, is willing to take a no-role situation, that would be a fine signing, especially on a potentially non-guaranteed deal. But if there's nothing in place and we're this far into the offseason, it could still happen. The Pacers signed Damian Wilkins really far into the summer a few years ago. They signed Jakar Sampson pretty far into the summer 2 summers ago at this stage. 3 summers ago. Wow, that was a long time ago. I can't believe that. It's still possible that they come back to this. And Lance, obviously, his ties to Indiana, I mean, he's in these talks for forever and ever. But it seems like at this point, youth is more important to them and forwards are more important to them. And acquiring assets with their space is important to them, hence what's out there, and them not doing anything to jeopardize their flexibility. So maybe once a lot more offseason dominoes fall and they know sort of their position in terms of grabbing assets from other teams or their salary situation or what's going on with their veteran players, then it would make a little more sense to be aggressive with that pursuit if they're going to make it or circle back on those conversations. As of right now, though, I get why no deal is in place, even if Lance is going to take an absolutely nothing role with this team. But as a retirement season for him, whenever that would come, he, as a legacy guy, yeah, I get why that he would want that. I get why the Pacers would want that. So we'll see where that's headed. I think that would be a nothing imminent thing until a lot more of the bigger offseason dominoes fall, just because he's a minimum player at a position the Pacers already have filled. But we'll see. It's not that's just me sort of guessing at how these teams plan and think in the offseason. Perhaps the Pacers view him as more than that. Perhaps he would like to sign earlier than that. There's a lot of factors at play just from a general symbiotic standpoint of player-team relationship. It seems like that would be something that takes longer into the offseason. And also LeBron James. Look, his extension can officially be signed starting on August 4th. That is a supposed deadline for the Lakers. There has not been much reporting on what he'd be willing to do with an extension at this time, but if he's not willing to, that could change the Lakers' plans. That could change their desperation with Westbrook. That could be a deadline that gets stuff going and does potentially impact the Pacers. So maybe some of that stuff, the tires get going on that this week, but I sort of doubt it. I think we're kind of going to be in a holding pattern of the NBA offseason for a while until one of the big dominoes falls, and then the others can fall. So let's talk less about Pacers free agency team building stuff and more about Aaron Nesmith, how he can help this Pacers team on the floor this season. I just dug into some tape and some numbers with him to write a little story about him and what he can help this team with and how he can be a fit long term. Now to share some of those stats. Before we do that, though, I would like to talk to you guys about Built Bar, who are making the best tasting protein bars ever. They're protein bars that are 100% covered in chocolate and basically taste like a candy bar. If you haven't tried them yet, or they're Puffs variety that have marshmallows in them, you're depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a new flavor of Built Bars, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right, they've done it again. Cookie dough chunk puff. I've got 6 of them in my pantry right now. Light, chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, and of course covered 100% in real chocolate. All the joys of eating cookie dough, not the hassle of making it. Plus, it's healthy for you. Only 160 calories, 15 grams of protein, and it's collagen protein your body absorbs faster. It's delicious. It's good for you. You've got to try them yourself. They have a ton of awesome flavors on their website, including a mixed package with a ton of their most popular flavors. Go to Built.com. Try them yourself. Use the promo code LOCKED15 when you check out. You'll get 15% off your order. That promo code again is LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. Like I said earlier, I recommend your second listen be Locked On Celtics to hear more about the passing, life, and legacy of Bill Russell. That is going to be, I'm excited to hear what John has to say about him. John has the history of the Celtics down, and Bill Russell was just such an impactful human being, both in terms of basketball and as a person. And speaking of the Celtics, that was a weird transition. But let's talk about Aaron Nesmith a little bit, because I just wrote about him. And I thought something that was interesting in the context of Aaron Nesmith, and where I will start here, came from a Rick Carlisle quote on the broadcast at a Summer League game. Rick Carlisle, as many of you know, drafted by the Celtics, played for Boston in the 80s when he was a player of basketball. And something he was talking about on this broadcast was Nesmith and his opportunities he had with the Celtics. And I just tried to open Rick Carlisle's basketball reference page and opened his coach page on accident. But Nesmith with Boston in 2 seasons played in less than 100 games and didn't play that much because that was a team trying to win at that time. They were trying to win games. They made the finals. Obviously, they were successful in doing so. But you don't have a long leash on winning teams. And this is a much, much, much smaller scale example of that. But that's why Aaron Holiday in his rookie season didn't play much and had to defer to TJ McConnell a lot. That's why TJ Leaf didn't play much. Well, there were other factors there too. But that is sometimes the case for rookies on good teams. It's unusual for teams with top 20 picks to be really good sometimes. That was the case for the Celtics and Nesmith. It was hard for him to get out there. Carlisle was drafted to the Celtics in 1984 when he was ultimately picked. In the 3rd round, by the way, a rare thing. Anywho, he played from 1984 to 1990 in the league, and he won the championship in 1986, right? So when he was on the Celtics, they were a championship contending team. So he was in a similar boat as a young player, drafted at 25. He basically had to play well or he wouldn't play because they were trying to win. They were trying to have the best lineups out there. So he said on the broadcast that he can relate to Aaron Nesmith, both ironically in terms of franchise, but in terms of situation, going from that situation. Jalen Smith had this too, of going from a team that's trying to win and you're young and it's hard for you to grow through your mistakes on the court. And Jalen Smith came to the Pacers and really popped. And I think Nesmith has a chance to do a similar thing. Carlisle mentioned earlier this summer that teaching is one of his favorite parts of coaching. Jalen Smith could grow. He was talking about that in the context of Mather, and I think that could apply to Aaron Nesmith as well. And some interesting numbers about Nesmith here. Let me talk about his development, his playing time so far in his career. Number one, so this is something I talk about with a lot of the 2020 NBA draft, and I think this is going to be true for a lot of these guys. This is their first true offseason normal time of their basketball career in like 2.5 years, because they basically had a weird college basketball season end with COVID, and they had a bunch of time off, and then they had to do nothing while the NBA was going, and they got drafted in November and started playing like 2 weeks later in games in the NBA. So they never had a traditional offseason. They didn't get to work out for teams. They only could do virtual stuff. And they get thrown right into the league. And then they still have an abbreviated first NBA offseason. This is the first real NBA offseason for a lot of that 2020 draft. Jalen Smith, Tyrese Haliburton, Aaron Nesmith, all in this boat for the Pacers. I'll be curious how much that helps them grow, having the normal timeline to grow, to be with coaches, to work on their games in the offseason. All those guys were drafted 19 months ago, 20 months ago now, because it's August 1st. It's way too early in the day for me to be doing a podcast. But I think that could be something helpful for Aaron Nesmith in his career. He's also played less than 100 games in his career, which is mind-blowing to me. It seems like he's been around for longer than that. And this was one that I thought was fascinating as well. Aaron Nesmith, 2 years in the league, nearly 100 appearances, has only played in over half of a game, so 24 minutes or more, 7 times in his entire career, right? I think that sort of displays the lack of opportunity he had in Boston. And I am not saying that to criticize Boston at all. They made the finals. They are very good. They have clearly made the right steps to grow as a team and put players in positions to succeed. Nesmith was not a part of that. That's totally fine for the Celtics. But that does also display to me how little opportunity Nesmith has actually had to get out there and play. And this is a chance to be a Jalen Smith-esque thing. I'm not saying it will be. I'm not even saying Jalen Smith is a success story yet, but it could be a situation where the guy goes from a team where he can't play as much because of that team situation, because of his position, things like that, goes to the Pacers where they can play him. They have a more defined role for him, although I'll talk about role in a second. And then they pop and they look good and they succeed. That could be the case for Nesmith as well. Here's some stuff that I dug into and found that I thought was pretty interesting. Catch and shoot numbers for Nesmith in his career: 68th percentile in the entire NBA last year as a catch and shooter. Fantastic three-point shooter in college, 41% of nearly 300 attempts. Good free throw shooter. 34% as a catch and shoot guy from three in his NBA career. Not great, but still passable. Good. For a guy who had a really crummy shooting season last year, that number still being successful and buoying well, I thought was noteworthy. And I think in a situation like the Pacers have with Haliburton, they have a better passer than most Celtics players, or all Celtics players really, in Haliburton. Haliburton could be a really good help for Nesmith to get open and get him the ball on time in the right spots. Timing was an issue for Nesmith a lot this season. Some of that's on him. But if Haliburton and him can click really well, I think that would help him as well. Something else that I think was interesting, did I say 68th percentile for catch and shoot? I did not mean that. But he was 68th percentile for movement scoring last season. No, okay, holy cow, I'm tripping all over myself. I was correct when I said it earlier. But that 68th percentile coming off of screens last season. So he is, when he's on the move, beyond the arc or inside the arc as a scorer, and has been an effective player in the NBA, in the top 1/3 of the league, really. So that 68th percentile number does not apply to catch and shoots. 34% as a catch and shoot three guy, 68th percentile off of screens guy. So when he's away from the play, coming around a screen, he's been effective at scoring and shooting from all over the court. And the Celtics also saw Nesmith's corner three-point attempt rate dip from year 1 to 2. These are very niche stats, but he's a good corner three-point shooter. So a lot of the context and numbers from his year 1 to 2 3-point shooting dip, when he dropped 10%, yeah, that's bad, regardless of context. But you add in a little context where he took more off the dribble threes and less of the catch and shoot ones he's better at. He took fewer of the movement shots that he's in the top 1/3 percentile of. And he took less from the corners where he's been money, or better at least, in his career. It makes sense that it would drop at least to some extent. Getting him back in those situations could really help him in an offensive role setting because, look, he's not that great handling the ball. I think we saw some of those struggles at Summer League. He's not a fantastic cutter in terms of offensive timing, but if he can be a shooter or a movement shooter, even at a 34% clip, that'll at least keep him in the game early in his Pacers tenure. He's good in transition as well. I think just in general in movement situations, he's okay, which makes me think he could be a good cutter, but he's not at that point yet. The other side of the ball, defense, decent ISO defender, guy, good athleticism and can stay in front of guys, bulky at 6'5", but he's only 6'5", right? So he's kind of limited in what he can do there. His team defense pattern recognition needs a little bit of work, but the Celtics did, the biggest stat I found here, have a positive defensive on-off with Nesmith last year. They had a better defensive rating with Nesmith on the court than off. The Boston Celtics, one of the best defenses in the league. Obviously, that's limited minutes compared to the totality of the Celtics season and how much time they played. But there were a lot of stats I found that suggest, in the right role in this Pacers system where they'll need him to defend some wings and some twos, where they'll need him to be a movement shooter and get freed up that way. If he can do those things in the Pacers system and do it every game or play every game, I think he's got a chance to grow, especially with a coach like Carlisle who loves teaching in a situation where he could play every game. But that's where I got to stop. I don't know that he's going to play every game. It makes sense if he splits time between the 2 and the 3 that he could get 10 to 15 minutes a game for this Pacers team, but who knows what they are thinking. They have not seen him yet play in practice or anything like that. We'll see what Rick Carlisle thinks of him once the time comes. But if they can limit his roles to the things he's good at, all Nesmith has to do is be good at either defending or threes, and he can stay in any game. If he can get good at both, then he's a quality rotation player for years and years. So I wanted to share those stats because I really dug into the numbers on him for this story and had a good time doing it. I haven't really done a nerdy numbers thing for a long time. And I'll be curious to see what Nesmith's time with the Pacers looks like and how he ends up as a player, because I'm not super high on what he can be as a creator, but if he can be a shooter at all, the Pacers really need what he can do because they were not a good shooting team last year. One more segment here on Locked On Pacers on a pretty under-discussed topic, I think, in the Pacers media landscape. And I take some responsibility for this, for not covering it when it came out basically a week ago, but a lot happened between now and then. Larry Bird, no longer an active role with the franchise. We'll talk about it to end out today's Locked On Pacers. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, hop on over to Locked On NBA. Hear the latest news from around the league, including Colin Sexton, Donovan Mitchell, and more. And I hosted today, so you'll love to hear that. Let's talk about what Scott Agness reported in Fieldhouse Files this week. Rare that I'm so late to something like this. But on July 25th, Scott Agness reported Larry Bird no longer has an active role with the Indiana Pacers. Fascinating to hear 2 years after Donnie Walsh retires as well, to hear that Bird no longer has that. Look, he's a legend in the league in general, but also with the Pacers franchise. As a former decision maker for them, turned consultant, he was around a lot. Like when I started on the beat in 2017, I saw him not often. I would never say often, but I would definitely say I saw him on enough occasions that I was like, oh yeah, Larry Bird's around, and especially at draft workouts. I think that was most of the time when I would see him back then. But that stopped being the case, or became less and less the case over the years. I think Scott does a good job detailing that in his story. And now Scott's report is, let me get the exact wording here. Scott says he's been told for months that no longer does Bird have an active role within the Pacers franchise. And then Kevin Pritchard confirmed that, saying, yeah, he's not active. But look, Larry's a good friend of mine, and he's a good friend of Rick Carlisle's. Anytime they need help, they know they can look to him. Larry Bird is always available. So fascinating to see Larry Bird step away. He always had a positive impact, both in terms of his presence and his decision-making abilities. And it's so fascinating to see this happen 2 months after Donnie Walsh stepped away from the Pacers. Like, that is two of the biggest Pacers decision makers like ever. No longer being as active with the team or stepping away from the team. If you think about the history of this franchise and the decision makers that they've really had, think about who Herb Simons had to hire in the front office. Basically just Donnie Walsh, and then Bird, and then Donnie again for a little bit, and then Bird again for a little bit before Kevin Pritchard. Like, it's basically just been a few guys that have really run the show and made the decisions around Indiana, which is really, really interesting to me. That two of them are no longer around. Like, those guys have valuable experience and value, and a lot of knowledge and acumen and relationships built up over years and years. And I think Scott laid out an important part of this, right? Like, Larry played a decent part in Rick Carlisle coming to the Pacers last year when he was hired as the head coach. And, Donnie obviously approved of that as well. They relied on him and his past expertise. That really matters, having those sort of brain powers available to you. So I think it is important that it was reported that they can reach out to Larry and still get his input if they need it. But less active is you always like to have as many brains as possible. They just hired Happy Walters, an ex-agent, earlier this summer. Right? You always want as many brain powers, relationships, guys that you can have in your franchise, and that's why it's not. It's obviously preferable to have Larry Bird's knowledge than to not. So that's fascinating to hear that he has no longer has an active role with the franchise, especially since he was, a valued consultant since KP took over the front office just, a half decade ago. So we'll see if this changes a lot, if they make any more hires or shake up the front office. I'm not even saying Bird's off the payroll or not somebody they can talk to anymore. I don't know that. I haven't confirmed that with anybody myself, but it is interesting that a former president of basketball operations for the franchise is no longer in an active role. And Bird had an interesting tenure, right, as the GM of this team, right, taking over right before the brawl year, had a chance to build a very good team. In fact, there's a chance you could argue that he, in 1 year, was built, it was already mostly in place. The team that could have been the best team in Pacers franchise history before, again, the brawl really derailed that. He drafted Danny Granger, He traded for Peja, although that was sort of forced on him. He signed Sarunas. He got Austin Crozier in the door. He did a lot of really good stuff to set the Pacers up well, and then transitioned them out of another crappy era in the late 2000s. Getting them to the Paul George teams had a role in the Kawhi Leonard draft, which the George Hill trade obviously wasn't great, but also had a role in building that team that ended up going to the finals, and then again took over again in 2013 on that team that again almost went to the finals with PG and others on it. So he had a lot of success running the team. Stepped down right before had to trade away PG. Of course, that was the Kevin Pritchard era's beginning. Very tough start to an era, but Bird did a lot of good stuff with this franchise. Coached them obviously for not for a very long time, but coached them for a few years as well before running the show and the decision-making process, and almost leading them two different iterations of teams to the finals before they couldn't take down the Heat, and the brawl really turned that 2004 team on its head. Obviously, not worth relitigating that in this segment, but no longer active role with the franchise. I thought that was very interesting and noteworthy and worth calling out at this stage of the summer that Larry Bird not as active with the franchise. We'll see if that ends up meaning anything. We'll see if that has any ripple effects in terms of their hiring. But that's all I have on that. There's not a lot of obvious ripple effects since Larry doesn't have a clearly defined role in any one time of the season, whether that's trade, signings, draft. He's not around more often at some times than the others. We'll see what, if anything, changes from this. But it is fascinating that now the Pacers are kind of transitioning to a new era with less of the old guard around, no Donnie Walsh around as he retired. And now Larry Bird taking a non-active role with the franchise. We'll see what that means for them. We'll see who's involved, what it means, and how this changes the Pacers going forward. But good reporting from Scott. You can find all that at Fieldhouse Files, his Substack. Fantastic work from Scott all summer, as always. So thank you guys a ton for listening today. A little shorter podcast because it's 2 a.m. and I had to go to bed. But I had a lot of work to do this weekend, a lot of family to see. So I am way behind on everything. That's also why the show doesn't have a guest like I thought it would. I'll try to have one on later this week. I've got to do some planning with some other people and get some stuff done. I'm just way behind. Guys. I'm really sorry. Having two jobs sometimes can kick your butt. But I'm not here to whine. I'm here to talk about the Pacers, and I hope you guys enjoyed today's show with the latest news catch-up later this week for some topic considerations. Likely going to do one of them on Tyrese Haliburton, whether that means can he be an all-star this year? What does that mean for his future going forward? Can he be most improved player? Stuff like that. The other one, we'll see what kind of guest it is. I'll try to get players on this month. We'll see what happens if anybody's available via text or not. And then someone who worked for the team this season as well, I would like to try to have on this week or next. We'll see what happens. So stuff to look forward to for you on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Thank you all for listening today. Hope you had a great weekend, and we will see you tomorrow.